Machiapi Machiapi Lena Shichangu Lakota Imataha. Greetings, relatives. I am very happy to join you today. My Lakota name is Wachiampiwi, which means they depend on her. Cheryl Crazy Bull. I'm the president and CEO of the American Indian College Fund. I just wanted to reach out today to share some stories for my relatives who are out there watching, to talk about what's happening at the American Indian College Fund and how we're supporting tribal colleges and universities and supporting our students. I'm a citizen of the Chichango Lakota Nation, which is also known as the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. I lived there my whole life, and also for a number of years up on the Lummi Nation, serving as the president of Northwest Indian College. There are so many incredibly challenging things going on in our tribal communities, and I just wanted to share how personal all of this is to me. Like I shared, I grew up on the road. I went to school there. I started my career in education there. Many of my relatives live there today and live on different reservations throughout the United States. I've spent the last 38 years working in Indian education, and I have great awareness of the many social and economic and health challenges that my people face. It's very difficult for our families today. They're very traumatized by the experience that they're having. So this pandemic is exacerbating the challenging environments that students are facing. It's exacerbating the already challenging dynamics that our communities face and our tribal governments. So we're very concerned that this crisis will lead to a situation where our students are unable to continue the momentum that they personally have in order to get a good education, and that they're very challenged by the experience of um, navigating this current environment. The College Fund has made great strides working with the tribal colleges to keep the number of Native Americans who are getting their college degrees moving forward as a progressive experience. So we want to be able to support our students so that they can continue to give back both today and for future generations. So today, only a little more than 14% of Native Americans who are over the age of 25 have a college degree. This is compared to over 30, almost 31% of the general population of this country. So we have to have more than equity in order to achieve parity in that environment. We have to be able to support our students through every kind of situation that they find themselves in, and particularly in this one where we have such an incredible crisis that we're dealing with. So I'm really happy to be sharing from my home. I share with you with a good heart and a socially distanced handshake, as we would say, Lakota, Chante Washte, Yuha Zuha Chayuzapo. And just making sure that you have that opportunity to learn more about what the College Fund is doing. So we've established an emergency relief fund that is supporting Native students who are in college today. We're in constant communication with our students. So every day I hear various reports from our communities, from our students, and from our tribal colleges about how they're doing. We're very concerned that the students have current emergent emergency needs that need to be met. So we see this experience that students are having with their colleges converting to online classes as being a particular challenge for our students because they live in remote environments where the digital divide still exists and they don't have access to the kinds of technologies that they need to support that. We recently conducted a survey of our students that showed in 1 in 5 students didn't have access to a laptop and the kinds of peripherals that we would all sort of take for granted as being, part of what we need as students. I know that when I'm, taking an online class, I'm really grateful that I'm able to have a printer at home that I can print out the materials and use those that to continue to do the work. So our emergency fund is going to provide students with tech resources that they need. So that's a real important part of the work that we're doing. Uh, and it just so happened that a few weeks ago, the College Fund partnered with the Hope Center out of Temple University to do a study of the food and housing security of tribal college students. And we received that report just a few weeks ago. And it showed that prior to this pandemic even happening, 62% of the students who responded said that they had experienced food insecurity in the prior 30 days. That ranged from everything from worrying about food to actually not having food. So we know that the pandemic has exacerbated that because of food shortages and food costs across the country, and even more so in remote tribal communities where our students go to school. Our students shared in that same survey that about 69% of them had experienced housing insecurity, which ranged from not having the resources to pay for housing to moving around among different families, what people commonly refer to as like couch surfing, or actually not having a home, actually being homeless. So we know that that's exacerbated now by students who already live in extended family households and are finding themselves in that kind of situation where they have to be um, helping support resources for their community. So our students will, with our emergency relief, they'll be able to support their own living expenses. That would be food, shelter, medicines, maybe transportation that they need in order to even go to the doctor. We want our students to not have to make the decision, be forced to make that decision to stay in school or to buy medicine or pay their rent, pay for their electricity. So thanks to the support of people who are joining this conversation today, and who I hope will have the opportunity to view the conversation later, we're able to help these students. We're able to give them the kind of support that they need in order to overcome these enormous economic and social challenges that they're facing. My team and I are frequently talking to people. Of course, today, because of the shelter in place at our tribal colleges and our Indian reservations, and that many of us find ourselves in, we're doing a lot of this kind of conversation. We're doing Zoom calls and conference calls, and we're sharing that story all the time of the trauma that American Indian Alaska Native people have always experienced, and how this current pandemic has this incredibly traumatizing effect on the well-being of our communities. We know that many of our students are having, just like many of you, income insecurity. They're not sure if they're going to still have jobs, and many of them are the sole income in their families, they're the sole provider in their families. So we know they experience that stress, and that added stress makes it hard for them to decide whether or not they're going to stay in school. And we want to do everything that we can to relieve what one of my staff members calls the pain points that our tribal college presidents and our students feel, the different kinds of things that they experience every day that can make them not feel like an education is going to make a difference. So I want to talk about that a little bit, why we think education is the answer. That's a college funds theme. We think education is the answer to the very experience that our students are having today. We learned after the pandemic started, we thought we're going to take a look at where are our students focused on for their careers. And we found that of the students who are currently receiving a particular kind of scholarship support from us, about 40% of them are actually majoring in fields that would give them the tools and the resources that they need to address a pandemic. They're in the health professions, they're in STEM fields. We need them now, and we're going to definitely need them in the future to help us not only with this kind of a situation, but with the other kinds of health issues that our people have that put them at greater risk under these circumstances. So I think that's a really important piece of information that we have that shows the value of our students, the current and future of the tribe. I think that there's also a lot of really inspiring stories going on. So, and we also have a question and answer piece. So you're able to, if I can figure out for sure how I'm looking at the questions and answers. We did have someone inquire earlier how they could contribute, how they could support Native peoples and um, have a better understanding as a member of what they said was, sort of a middle class white family in the country. And I say, educate yourself about the experiences, the historical and contemporary experiences of Native people, and be an advocate in the education systems, be an advocate with legislation. I'm part of a group of people that work diligently on increasing the visibility of Indigenous people through a variety of organizations, but especially one called Illuminative. That's a way for you to make contributions that would be really useful. Um, to rising up Native people so that we're seen even today in this pandemic. We're not seen even by the mainstream media, even though the experiences that we're having are comparable to some of the worst hotspots in the country. And it's really important that you give us your support to be able to do that. Let's see. One of the questions had to do with if you're providing books for classes or delivering class materials as printouts. So, yes. So, one of the things that's happened at the tribal colleges and universities is that they've had to treat an, an education that's not face to face in a variety of different ways. So, they've had to create packets for students and have those packets delivered mailed to students. They've had to create an environment where professors are calling students to make sure that students have access to classes. One of the things we know is true in our tribal communities is that a lot of people, because they don't have a lot of resources, don't have access to things like smartphones or iPads we might take for granted. And I just wanted to share that our faculty are really stepping up to try to figure out ways to support students. But we learned, for example, that so many of our Native students have track phones that they were trying to figure out how to use those track phones to have classes. So one of the things the College Fund is doing is reaching out to some of our supporters to acquire technology resources that we can share with students and share with the tribal colleges so that they can eliminate that barrier and make sure that we can have kind of access for everybody. So at the College Fund, the thing about tribal colleges is they're very place-based, culturally rich institutions. So one of the other things that the College Fund is doing is making sure that we're supporting faculty. We're reaching out to faculty and we're asking them, what are your needs? Because they're people from the community as well. And many of our faculty members are tribal members. They are experiencing that some of the same challenges that our students experience. And tribal colleges are, very financially fragile institutions. And so a lot of their faculty members are also the sole provider in their family and, might be living in less than ideal conditions. And so we're reaching out to faculty and we're offering them support as they convert their classes to online, as they create packets, to work with students on a kind of almost an independent study basis. Faculty members and people like myself, we're deeply concerned about ensuring that tribal colleges have culturally rich education, because that's their purpose is, besides academic and vocational workforce work, their purpose is to preserve and restore our cultural knowledge and share that across the community. So how do we help them make sure that they have access to that? So the kinds of support that the College Fund is giving is as diverse as the people that we're serving. So we're providing emergency relief support to the tribal colleges for their students, but we're also reaching out and supporting the faculty who have to, ensure that students have access to the resources that they need for their education. The emergency relief fund, I don't know how many of you have the opportunity prior to this to go look at the College Fund's website, www.college.org. But on that website, you can find all kinds of ways that you could support the College Fund and support emergency relief and be assured that we're giving those resources to our tribal colleges so that they can support our students as they continue their education. Some of the other questions that I've had, why are Native students more negatively impacted? Well, I mentioned that students are often the primary source of income for their families, but in our tribal communities, unemployment is often scarce. And in the current environment, we're finding that people in communities are getting laid off from their jobs. So we know that's going to really affect um, some of our students as that kind of unfolds over the next several weeks. The healthcare issues that our students face, access to healthcare is a big challenge because if you go even to like my home reservation, the Rosewood Reservation, there is an Indian Health Service, which is a form of public health that is part of the treaty relationship that tribes have as a nation to nation with the United States government. We have an Indian Health Service hospital on our reservation, and we have tribal members who live 150, 180 miles away. And for them to access that tribal health service in the event of an emergency is an emergency in itself. So we want to keep our people as healthy as possible by removing stressors that cause them to have, um, a weakened response in the event that they do have some kind of exposure. I've been really proud of, and I've shared this with others as I've visited about what's going on in our tribal communities. Our tribal leaders stepped up almost immediately to take measures to protect our populations. They went to, banning travel. They created shelter in place policies and curfews, taking measures to ensure that their communities were exposure to COVID-19 is reduced. They've stepped up to, be inclusive of all of the different agencies and organizations in their communities. And tribal colleges have been part of that. So I'll give an example that one of the tribal colleges shared with us that they were part of their incident command crisis response team on their reservation. They're serving as the central location to receive donations that can be shared with tribal members, and then they're distributing those, especially things like food, cleaning supplies, masks, things like that are needed in tribal communities. And some of the tribal colleges have also stepped up to provide food services. Tribal colleges provide a lot of food services just as their normal course of business. They often provide, one or more free meals a day for their students. And I've been to tribal colleges where, there's a basket of snacks on the desks of different staff members so that when students stop in, they have that opportunity to grab something to eat. So we know that already exists there, and the tribal colleges, despite their limited resources, have stepped up to provide that kind of support in the emergency response space to frontline workers. One of our tribal colleges responded to this crisis by creating process or a mechanism by which they use their manufacturing program to and their 3D printing capacity to build face masks for frontline workers, including first responders like the police department and the fire department, emergency, the EMT staff. And last I heard, they were going to do about 3,000 masks. I mean, that's an institution with very limited resources whose tribe has been very challenged to respond to this crisis, but they stepped up to give that kind of support. I was really impressed by one of the a graduate of one of our tribal colleges who is now a faculty member at a nearby tribal college. She is a well-known expert on traditional foods and medicines, and she stepped up and along with her partner, her husband, and others to create 60 food bins that contain traditional foods um, and of course, she kind of laughed and said, of course, the elders want Folgers coffee. So they put Folgers coffee in, along with some seeds to help inspire people to maybe do gardening in the future. Um, these are not people with a lot of resources, but out of the generosity and their concern for the well being of people in their community, they stepped up to address that. So I think that that's a really, really great thing. We've also seen our students have really been concerned about maintaining their relationships because we as Indigenous peoples, kinship is the way that we define our place in the world. We define our place in terms of relationships. So they've taken and they've used technology like Facebook and other technologies to create ways to connect with each other. So we know about language groups that have been started by our students. Opportunities for get together. I myself am a part of a group from the College Fund that gets together to bead together. So we're doing bead projects and visiting with each other and sharing our work. So we're still focused on that part of us that is Indigenous, that kinship, those relationships. We're still maintaining that even in the face of this really incredible crisis that we're facing. I think that I would also, like to share that one of the challenges that I'm seeing in our tribal communities is that we don't really have the um, I'll voice that differently. What I'm seeing in our tribal communities is that this is an opportunity for a transformation of some of the way that we do business. So, among the things that I've become really aware of is the importance of technologies in our communities. So, technology, not just the kinds of things that allow you to get on the internet or take an online class, but the technology that tells you where your people are at and what your people are doing and keeping track of people in your community who have needs, being able to support that. We have to be able to be responsive to that kind of opportunity. And I'm thinking of the future. I'm thinking of what does it look like for us and come fall. How are we going to be providing the kinds of academic and community engagement services that we need to provide in our communities that still stay in the place of our kinship and our relationships? So I'm kind of thinking of the future and thinking of how to support our tribal colleges and universities as they look to their future, as they look to what it's going to be like for them in the upcoming months. I like to think that when there's a crisis, there's an opportunity for innovation and transformational programs. And in the case of our tribal colleges, I believe that there's that opportunity for us to keep building on the strengths of our organizations and the work that we're already doing. I think that one of the hopes that I have is that we'll be able to find enough emergency resources that students for the next 3 or 4 months, they're able to finish their classes. If they're ready to graduate, they can graduate because they've had their immediate needs supported. And because they've had their immediate needs supported, then they're able to think about what next fall looks like for them, how they'll be able to go to school, stay in school, inspire other members of their family. You know, the College Fund works with early childhood education. We're looking at what does it take to keep our families engaged and support the safety and security of our families at times like this. We work a lot with high school students, and, you know, high school students, they're full of possibility and hope. And how do we help them still see that? You know, my team has just done such a great job. They've established a coaching hotline so students can call, and high school students can call and get support for, you know, getting into college and still following their dreams. And college students can contact us and find out different ways that they could get out in and still move forward with the kinds of things that they need to do. So the last thing I'll share is that not too many months ago, the College Fund worked with Gallup Purdue with some support from Strata Education Network to do a study of the alumni of tribal colleges. Those of us who've worked in the tribal education our whole lives, we were not surprised by the results of that study. One of the things that that study showed was that tribal colleges were viewed by their graduates as being the best place for them to get an education, the best place for them to be supported and to be able to make a difference in their communities. And then we also saw from that study that the majority, again, something that most of us knew, they're still working in their communities. They're still supporting their community's well-being. They're still serving their communities. And that's what we want to see continue. That's what the College Fund is committed to. That's what we're committed to for in the support of our tribal colleges and universities. Let's keep educating people. Let's keep moving those people into the career pathways that they know will make a difference in their communities. And by doing so, you know, we're also really supporting future generations. We're supporting children. We're supporting the young adults that I was talking about that are coming out of high school and needing to go to college. So I want to thank you for joining me on this video. As you can see, I'm in my sewing room. I'm very thankful that I'm a person who has a fabric stash, so I'm able to take advantage of that during this time. So please do go to the College Fund's website and look at ways that you can support our students, and feel free to reach out to us and ask us any questions. I do have one last question that someone shared. Is it a donation that will invest in the donation and spend the donation money in the next year with the current crisis? So we're actually doing both. We're donating, we're supporting students' emergency relief, providing them with resources that they need for current programming. But again, we're keeping our eye on the future and the fact that we still need to provide scholarships and support services to students so that they can have success. So the College Fund is nimbly stepping into that place where we're supporting current student needs, current faculty needs, giving emotional, spiritual support to our colleagues at the tribal colleges, but also remembering that we have to also look to the future. That's what our ancestors did. Our ancestors thought, what happens to the next 7 generations because of the things that I'm doing right now, the actions that I'm taking, the decisions that I'm making. And, you know, I encourage you and invite you to be a part of that, commitment to thinking about the teachings of our ancestors that take us to support this generation and the 7 generations after it. So I hope you're all being safe out there. I hope you're taking good care of your families, and that I pray every day for all of us to have the resources and the support that we need to continue to be healthy and to get through this crisis. All my relations. Pilamayapi, thank you.